Greetings from England! We here at TripleJump are occasionally, but very often not, proud of our English heritage, and so today we thought we'd celebrate some video games that are just as English as bacon butties, grey skies, fighting in pubs, punching police horses, and queuing for a kebab. While it's true that throughout the history of gaming, the fabled lands of Japan and America have been perhaps most synonymous with the medium, the impact of English developers has been great indeed, with the likes of Codemasters, Rare, Creative Assembly, and many more all hailing from our green and pleasant land. Having said that, the games on today's list don't have to have been made in England to qualify, they just have to be really, really English. Also, we had to make a rule to cut back on licensed games, because of course titles based on Harry Potter, Peaky Blinders, and Grange Hill are going to be as English as Mr. Bean drinking tea on the tube. Alright, that's enough stereotypically polite chit-chat. It's time to unfurl St. George's Cross and listen to the harmonic tones of Land of Hope and Glory as we identify 10 games that are just unashamedly English. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 video games that revel in their Englishness. Number 10. Zombi. Evoking the iconic piece of British cinema that is 28 Days Later, Zombi, or Zombi, takes London and fills it with animated flesh-eating corpses. This survival horror game, originally released on the Wii U under the name Zombie U, is one of a surprising number of titles on our list that was developed outside of England, with Ubisoft Montpellier taking up the helm. In Zombie, players take on the role of a survivor who ends up doing the bidding of Dr. Knight, a royal doctor based inside Buckingham Palace. This high-ranking physician believes he may have a cure for the zombie plague that infects the country, and it's the player's job to help him, while also dealing with a secretive organisation known as the Ravens of Dee. What this boils down to is a jaunt around an extremely murky London, yes, murkier than usual, battering zombified versions of familiarly uniformed London coppers and palace guards with the most English of all bludgeoning weapons, the cricket bat. Visiting such iconic locations as the Tower of London and Buckingham Palace itself, Zombie provides a surprisingly thorough experience for would-be tourists, with its locations proving very reminiscent of the real thing. There aren't as many zombies shuffling around in real London though. Well, not during the day at least. Number 9. Grand Theft Auto, London 1969. Despite being developed in Scotland and being the brainchild of Scottish game development genius David Jones, the original Grand Theft Auto is definitely American, with its 3 locations, Liberty City, San Andreas, and Vice City, all being based on real-life locations in the USA. For the standalone expansion known as GTA London 1969, however, Rockstar brought the fledgling series closer to home, even if this particular jaunt to England's capital was developed by Rockstar Canada. As you might have already discerned, GTA London 1969 is set in London, complete with city-appropriate police officers, taxis, and buses. Oh, and those Union Jack sports cars that people always drive around in over here. I've got 2, actually. Much like its originator, GTA London 1969 has players undertaking tasks for the criminal underworld in order to rise up the ranks, with plenty of free-roaming carnage and vehicular manslaughter along the way. Perhaps the most English thing about GTA London 1969 are its fully voice-acted cutscenes set in seedy flats and dark alleyways where unsavoury geezers interact with the player in snappy Cockney dialogue straight out of the Wish version of Snatch. These cutscenes represent an interesting time for a series set to become one of the most commercially successful of all time, and infamously dodgy as they are, they're definitely very, very English. Number 8. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. A quick trip to Victorian London now with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is set in England's storied capital, a bit of a trend here, in the year 1868 during the Second Industrial Revolution. This is another game developed in Canada too, this time by Ubisoft Quebec. Assassin's Creed Syndicate does a great job of portraying London during Queen Victoria's reign, complete with rainy rail yards, misty bridges, and smoky skylines, giving the capital a certain historical mystique, despite the place not really being very nice to live in those days, or today, or ever. Where Syndicate's Englishness really shines through, though, is in its cast of supporting characters. Players are likely to bump into such historical English dignitaries as famed naturalist Charles Darwin, timeless novelist Charles Dickens, and even Queen Victoria herself, whose reputation and royal countenance has inspired the name of many a pub throughout the years. Not content with just portraying Victorian-era London, Assassin's Creed Syndicate also gives players a chance to visit 1916 London late in the game. Unfortunately, this is during the First World War, and things are quite bleak in this time period too. London is supposedly a really nice place to be nowadays, honest, although it won't be for too long if the next game on our list is to be believed. Number 7. Watch Dogs Legion. Continuing the theme of Canadian developers having some kind of obsession with the big smoke, this Ubisoft Toronto developed title portrays our capital once again. With Watch Dogs Legion, however, we're treated to a somewhat disconcerting near-future reimagining of the city where real-life concerns like AI, rapidly advancing technology, and cryptocurrency have led to job losses, economic instability, and political unrest. This slice of post-Brexit Britain might hit a little too close to home for some Londoners, but with Big Ben, the London Eye, and those famous holographic statues on Westminster Bridge making an appearance, at least the tourists are happy. Wait, what do you mean there aren't actually holographic statues on Westminster Bridge? Oh man. Anyway, in Ubisoft Toronto's somewhat dystopian vision of London, players are tasked with hacking their way through a story of counter-terrorism and of freedom fighters opposing a harsh surveillance state where average Londoners are the heroes of the story. Apparently fictional holographic statues and drone-filled skies aside, Watch Dogs Legion's rendition of modern London is close enough to give any who visited the city a definite sense of déjà vu. Seriously though, game developers, you know there's more to England than just London, right? There's Stoke, for example. Beautiful Stoke. Number 6. Professor Layton and the Curious Village. Alright, I've had enough of these red double-decker buses and black cabs for now. Let's head out into the countryside with Professor Layton and the Curious Village. Despite being developed by Japanese studio Level 5, and despite the titular village having a very French-sounding name in Saint Mystère, Professor Layton and the Curious Village is a delightfully English-feeling game, thanks in no small part to the gentlemanly, upstanding, tea-loving protagonist, Professor Layton himself. Its animated cutscenes effortlessly evoke the English countryside, which is, in reality, absolutely chock-full of curious villages, and the Professor's voiced lines, as well as those of his Cockney scamp sidekick Luke, are Englishness defined, apart from all of the bad stuff. The storyline feels like something that classic English detectives like Sherlock Holmes, Miss Marple, and Detective Barnaby from Midsummer Murders might find themselves involved in, concerning the death of a baron and a will hiding a great fortune, and the Professor goes about uncovering the mystery by solving puzzles in an extremely upright and civilized manner. With his tasteful attire and polite yet adventurous nature, Professor Layton is the picture of an English gentleman. The Mr. Ben of gaming, if you will. Only especially old English people will get that one. Number 5. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. It's time to visit another fictional English village now, and this time we're off to Yorton. While Saint Mystère certainly had a bit of a continental flair, Yorton is English through and through, with the village itself doing enough to earn Everybody's Gone to the Rapture a place on our list. I mean, it's not as if Yorton's inhabitants could have done it, they've all gone to the Rapture. Presumably. As picturesque as it may seem, there can be something decidedly eerie about the British countryside, especially when you're out there all alone with only rustling leaves for company. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture takes this concept and runs with it, dropping the player into a very authentic feeling English village that's been completely and mysteriously abandoned. While exploring Yorton, players will come across spectres made of light that reenact past events, and will also locate various radio broadcasts and recordings that gradually unveil the story. Devoid of the usual video game type stuff like shooting and platforming, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is perfectly content to let the player wander in their own time, finding things and gradually solving the mystery. A meandering stroll along country roads, past woods, fields, and humble village buildings, all accompanied by a lingering sense of dread. Can't get much more English than that. Number 4. Fable 3. The Fable series, the brainchild of the very English Peter Molyneux, is set in the world of Albion, which also happens to be an ancient word for the British Isles, and represents a reimagining of rural medieval Britain that takes cues from folklore and legend to add a fantastical spin. We've chosen Fable 3 as the most English-ist of the series, not least due to its further development and opening up of a particularly English fantastical setting and the introduction of a smoggy industrial revolution, but mostly because of the cast of voice actors that developers Lionhead brought aboard. English institutions like Zoe Wanamaker and Bernard Hill make a return from the first game, Stephen Fry returns from the second title, and the likes of John Cleese, Ben Kingsley, Jonathan Ross, and Simon Pegg lend their voice talents for the big-budget third in the series, resulting in the most typically English cast assembled since Love Actually. Of course, the actual game received something of a mixed reaction, with the first part of the adventure being the familiar Fable we all know and love, and the second part throwing a big shadowy spanner into the works that caused a lot of series fans to walk away without saving Albion from disaster. There's always Fable 2 though, still super English. Number 3. We Happy Few. We've touched on the eerie folk horror of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture in an earlier entry, but what happens if the creepiness dial is turned right up? You get a village full of people who suppress unhappy memories with a drug called joy, in a perverted metaphor of the English keep calm and carry on stiff upper lip mentality, apparently. While everybody's gone to the rapture and the Fable games were created by English studios, We Happy Few represents yet another attempt by Canadian developers to capture undiluted Englishness. Set in the fictional English town of Wellington Wells, which combines the names of two real towns in England, We Happy Few wonders what England might have been like if things went very differently in World War II. The story reveals that the inhabitants of Wellington Wells, or Wellies as they're adorably known, did a very bad thing that caused the German occupiers to voluntarily leave their island. Those Wellies who don't take their joy are driven to despair and madness by their memories of the very bad thing, and the sinister events of the game ensue. Is it really true that there's an unsettling side to that typical English stoicism and politeness? What a downer, if so. Number 2. The Mystery of the Druids. Before London, curious villages surrounded by rolling hills and fish and chip shops, local pubs and cream teas, do you know what made up England? Misty forests, wolves, standing stones, and druids! Probably. 2001 German-developed adventure game The Mystery of the Druids takes us back to this primal, mysterious version of England with a tale that, while set in the modern day, plumbs the murkiest depths of the nation's distant past. Opening with a camera pan that encompasses foggy woods, misty moorlands, and then World Heritage Site Stonehenge surrounded by hooded figures who are clearly up to no good. The Mystery of the Druids concerns a series of rural murders that have piqued the interest of Scotland Yard detective Brent Halligan. While Brent Halligan isn't really a very English-sounding name, he is a very English fellow who goes about his investigations in a polite and well-spoken manner and gets the job done in the end. The plot involves ritualistic sacrifices, cannibalism, brainwashing, and a scheme to subdue the world. And while none of these things really go on much in modern-day England, it's all there in the past if you dig deep enough. Number 1. How to be a complete bastard. Modern England really was at its most English during the 80s. With Queen Elizabeth on the throne and Maggie Thatcher in number 10, upper lips had never been stiffer and council estates had never been grimmer. Amongst all this dreariness, that traditional self-deprecating humour was growing in prominence, and one man at the forefront was comedian Adrian Edmondson. His book, How to Be a Complete Bastard, was converted into a video game by Sentient Software in 1987 and released for the ZX Spectrum, Amstrad CPC, and Commodore 64. In How to Be a Complete Bastard, players must attempt to be as much of a bastard as possible, with successful bastard-like activities increasing your bastard points and gradually lighting up the phrase "complete bastard" across the bottom of the screen. Part of being a successful bastard, however, is self-preservation, with activities that stray from bastardness and veer into the psychotic or dangerous, resulting in our hero being arrested or even killed. This struggle between the need to be as offensive and aggravating as possible without going too far and coming across as too much is perhaps the most English thing of all, and earns How to Be a Complete Bastard a coveted spot on our list. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go wash my mouth out with soap and water. I hope my mum doesn't watch this. Sorry, Mum.